Well, today we're going to be talking about Supplier One.
Not barbecue? Come on.
Not barbecue anymore. Walmart's kind of new platform that is encompassing a lot of different functions from different retail link apps. And we'll be talking a little bit about it, answering some questions, and exploring some of the kind of directions that this might be going in. But if you've never been here before, you don't know who we are. I am Peter. This is Allie. We are on the Supplier Wiki team. So we are constantly trying to work to find topics that are particularly insightful or helpful to suppliers in kind of whatever phase of life you're in, whether it's starting out or whether it's a little bit more advanced. So like today, we're covering more of a kind of a new issue, a new thing that Walmart is doing, but we like to cover the basics too. We like to cover some, to try to do some more kind of advanced courses as well. So let us know in the chat or wherever. We'll have our emails at the end of this too. What it is that you would like to hear from us, what it is that you would like us to kind of do some research on and some reporting on as well. A little bit more about that is there's a lot of other stuff that we do, not just webinars. So we have a pretty kind of faithful webinar base of people who attend those. Some do it more kind of just topically, but we have a lot of varieties of content out there, from ebooks to articles. We have these things that we call cheat sheets, which are basically just a kind of like a quick reference thing that you can keep on your desktop so that you don't always have to go into Retail Link to find what the departments are or whatever it is. So it's all there. It's all for free on Supplier Wiki, and there's a bunch of different kinds of varieties on a bunch of different kinds of topics too. So if there's something else that you're curious about or something else that is confusing to you and whatever's come up, we highly recommend that you go there to Supplier Wiki and just kind of do some poking around there too. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, and then we'll keep you up to date on all the webinars we're doing and a bunch of the other content too. That's that. Today, specifically, we're going over a high-level introduction to Supplier One for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with it. We'll look at some main features and then some tips and strategies for how to get the most out of it. Basically, we're doing an introductory kind of course to Supplier One. What are the kind of most important things that there are to know about it now that Item 360 is going away? This might become a more important issue to people as time goes on. So what is the future of Supplier One? And all that we'll be covering here in a little bit before a Q&A at the end for the last 10 or so minutes. If you have questions while we're going, there's a Q&A tab below, and that we like to differentiate from the chat. The chat we like to have for more of a kind of open discourse, any kind of comments that you might have or personal experiences that you can share with the user experience of Supplier One, for example. Today, all of that can go in the chat. The Q&A is for the more formal kind of questions that we'll answer at the end or earlier in the presentation if it's relevant on a particular slide. Another question that we get pretty regularly is, will we be getting a copy of the slide deck? Yes, you will. All of our slide decks are also available on Supplier Wiki. .supplypike.com. So definitely familiarize yourself with that if you want to go download any of those on any other topic. It's all there. But if you've signed up for this webinar with this email, you will receive an email in the next 3 to 4 business days with the slide deck and the recording, so you can have it that way too. But there's that. Before I get into SupplyPike, I also want to do a shout out for our YouTube channel. We have all of our webinars on YouTube as well. So you could just subscribe to the SupplyPike YouTube channel to kind of stay up to date with those too, and to find the older ones that we haven't done for a while. SupplyPike is the kind of bigger company. Supplier Wiki is just a part of SupplyPike, and we are all we got our start doing AP deductions and helping suppliers automate those. So it was originally just kind of a very specific thing, mostly with shortages. We were helping people to automate their deductions and to win back money quickly without a lot of human manual interference. But now we've been expanding into a lot of other forms of revenue loss. So um, that's our new kind of vision for the future. We have a saying here, catchphrase, I'm not sure what we call it, get paid and get better. So we want to help you win back money right away from the retailers, but we also want you to improve that process and to avoid those from the very beginning. So here are some of our trusted partners that we're really proud of working with. If you're not up there today, we'd love to see you there someday. And we do a lot of work across a lot of the major retailers, but not all of the major retailers. So if you have more questions about that, you can reach out to us too. But we are in just about every product category, and we have worked with a wide variety of suppliers too, which is one of our claims to fame, one of the things that we're kind of proudest of. We work with a lot of big companies and we work with a lot of small companies too. If you have deductions, then it's probably a good fit. But that's something that we really like on the Supplier Wiki team because we can come into contact with a lot of different suppliers of all kind of shapes and sizes, and that gives us a lot of kind of new insight into whatever the situation is. Last little introductory slide before we get into the content. If you're in the area, in the Bentonville area, if you're a Walmart supplier and you live here, we'd love to have you out for a supply chain themed happy hour at Social Project in Bentonville. It's a very cool place if you haven't been there before. So come, bring a friend. You just kind of basically have to be in a role that is somewhat related to supply chain. That's the only kind of qualification. But this is today. Yes, today is Thursday. Today from 4:30 to 6:30. So stop by after work and have a beer with us.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you for walking through our intro. And if you are interested in coming to the happy hour, I'll be there so you can say hi to me. We can chat about today's webinar. But yeah, just stop by. It's a great time. All right, we're going to talk about today Walmart Supplier One. And I want to just take this moment to invite everyone to participate in the chat because it's just such a new platform at Walmart. I think it's helpful to share the roadblocks or the learnings that we have. At Supplier Wiki, we can conduct research, we can talk to suppliers, but hearing from you is usually the best resource because you are in these programs, these applications, using them daily. So I invite you to share, big or small, any stories that you've had when working in these systems as we chat today. And we may pause and read some if we get enough in the chat. All right, but let's answer the question, what is Walmart Supplier One? So essentially, Supplier One is this program that kind of encapsulates a couple different retail link apps. So initially around November last year, Walmart announced the early adopter program for this new platform. It was announced in some of the supplier growth forums, and then there was some chatter around what it was and what purpose it would serve. And we're going to talk about some of the functions that it will serve. But essentially, if you've ever logged into Retail Link, there's a lot of cards when it comes into the applications section. And this has just been a means of consolidating some of those important apps into one platform so that that data is connected kind of all in one place and can inform each other or be used in similar workflows. All right. And then talking about Retail Link and Supplier One, if you've been to other webinars, you may be asking yourself, okay, is Supplier One a different platform? Is it like on Retail Link? What's happening? So essentially, Supplier One consists of some of those functionalities that are present in Retail Link. And Retail Link is, your one-stop shop. And what's different is that item 360, so you're going to hear us refer to this a couple different times. That is a platform that is kind of getting pulled into Supplier One, or an application rather. that will be going away in Retail Link. It won't be found in there, whereas Supplier One is going to be that secondary platform that will have some overlap with Retail Link, but it's going to be a different login than Retail Link. So just want to call that out. And we'll get into some of the topics that Supplier One is going to cover, but essentially the one that we'll probably focus primarily on today is item management, but there is some returns management, payment information. So we'll talk through that as well. Like I mentioned, it is its own login, so you can go to supplierone.walmart.com and you'll use the regular MFA login for Retail Link. So who has access to Supplier One? If this has changed, please let us know in the comments. This is kind of what we've seen from Walmart's documentation. So some suppliers have early access, and more suppliers should be getting that here since we're kind of past that early 2024 stage. But there's a lot of things happening at Walmart, especially in conjunction with Luminate transitioning from DSS to Luminate. So I'm not certain where this is on timeline, but opening that to y'all to talk about if you've experienced that, and then just how is that experience using that platform versus Item 360 or similar platforms that have been integrated under Supplier One. And then the question that we hear a lot of suppliers ask is why? Why is this something that Walmart is doing? So we have heard the concerns that suppliers have expressed concern that Retail Link apps are going to be replaced. So Walmart has officially said that several apps are not being replaced. The one that is going to be replaced, though, is Item 360 because it's essentially the same platform, just under Supplier One. But we're going to be at Supplier Wiki, especially kind of tracking to see what platforms, if like Nova, for example, is one that is not under Supplier One, if that would be integrated into Supplier One and would leave Retail Link, or if there were other situations. So be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. We're also writing articles on this, and Peter can share some of the articles we have on Supplier One in the chat as we're going through today's content. So Supplier One's objective is to streamline some of those siloed features for Retail Link and be able to introduce the universal system for prioritization of supplier action. So that's a lot of jargony terms, but this is kind of what was pulled from the language. But essentially kind of to what I spoke to before, in Retail Link, there's a lot of siloed features. What Walmart is trying to do, kind of what we've seen, and how I would word it in my own language, is making sure that suppliers understand how to use the platforms, making sure their information is accessible, just kind of modernizing a lot of the online platforms that suppliers use. I think you can kind of see the overall objective when you zoom out and think about the transition from DSS to Luminate. There's a lot of modernization there, with DSS being quite old platform, then direct commerce being switched to APDP. We can see in the last 20-something years, or not even 20-something years, since like 2019, there's been a lot of changes to platforms that I think is really Walmart trying to understand how to optimize these applications for retailers. And what I would say to that is there's always going to be kinks in the system, and hopefully we can talk about those here and understand, how to function with these platforms if there are issues, and then obviously bubble those issues up if it's something affecting a large amount of suppliers. All right, now let's talk about what some of those Supplier One main features are. So there's 4 main categories as of today. There's order management, there's items and inventory, there's claims and return scorecard, and payments and charges. So order management looks like there's some duplications of the Nova functionality, but as what Walmart has said currently, Nova is not going away at this point. We have seen items in inventory that is much more of a duplicate of the Item 360 functionality, and they have decided to move Item 360 away. and focus mainly on the Supplier One platform features. There's also the claims and returns scorecard, which is helpful for returns reporting. So we're going to be continuing to monitor that and put some of that information into our Walmart Returns 101 webinar. If you have watched that webinar in particular, if not, Peter can share that in the chat too if you want to learn a little bit more about returns. And then the payments and charges tab, which of now is just DSV orders currently with some deductions, data, and info that we're particularly interested in as well. All right, let's focus on order management. So we're going to show some screenshots, but if you have been into some of the portals that Walmart has built out, this is going to feel very similar. And by that, I mean some of those applications like the OTIF scorecard, Item 360, the SWEP scorecard. Some of these will have very similar kind of UX to them. Essentially, order management is it's designed to replicate and improve some of those functionalities in Nova. So it tracks some of those past due POs, what's been shipped, what's new, some of the cancellation requests, and closed orders. So here's kind of a quick look at what this order management tab is. So you can see what's open, what's receiving, closed, canceled. So some of that high level information. You can download all orders. You can search by purchase order. There's filters. You can do it by this particular supplier ID that you have. And then you kind of have that line information that goes down and can be broken into those different columns. And you can see, you know, the original MABD, the current MABD, what status it is, freight, who created it. So really helpful information and kind of organized a bit cleaner than how the Nova application is today. All right. So you'll notice from the order management, it is a helpful dashboard. It doesn't have all the features that Nova has within it. However, the items and inventory application in Supplier One does have a little bit more breadth to it. So if I even toggle back, you can see order management doesn't have a arrow down to see what else is in there. And then if you look at items in inventory, there's catalog, there's setup, there's item maintenance hub, and then there's submissions manager, which if you've watched one of our Item 360s webinars, whether it's a 101 or a 201, or even some of the webinars with One World Sync, we partner with them on some of our webinars, you'll notice that this is verbatim what Item 360 looks like. So it's meant to be a duplicate. That was their intention. And it's broken into the same subcategories that Item 360 had. This is really encouraging in my mind, just because it's something that suppliers can not have to learn new language or a new navigation necessarily. It's going to feel pretty similar, if not the same, to Item 360. So if you haven't ever been in Item 360 and you're learning these things for the first time, let's talk through them a little bit. So catalog is going to be essentially what it sounds like. It is the breadth of your products by GTN or UPC and the configurations and the hierarchy with your Walmart number or your WIN. So that's helpful for just seeing what's available. There'll be filters for like active or inactive. It's kind of everything that you have ever sent into Walmart, that you've ever shipped to Walmart or will be shipping to Walmart, may live in your catalog. Then second is your setup hub. This is for suppliers who need to add item proposals, item shippers, multi-boxes, and a multi-box is just econ items that ship in multiple boxes, if that's a new term for you. So that will feel very similar to Item 360 setup hub. And we've got lots of information on that in those webinars as well, if you are learning to set up a new product for the first time. Maintenance hub, this is this hub for item maintenance. So that's, you know, editing something on your product, adding product content, some of the particular details with like pack number, or if you're changing something within that. that's where you would go and edit in Maintenance Hub. So there's lots of things you can change in there. It's almost too much information sometimes. Then you have your submissions manager. This is for tickets for like maintenance or setup, so you can see what you've submitted, what your team has submitted, and what status it's at, depending on where it is in the process. So the statuses are complete, so it should be whatever action needed to be taken, whether it was maintenance or setup, it's done. Supplier action would be, as a supplier, you need to kind of click into that particular ticket and understand what action you need to take, or it's not going to go anywhere. And then Walmart action required for suppliers, really just you're waiting for Walmart to take action on that particular item, whether it's approving a setup or approving a maintenance or something along those lines. That's what those statuses would kind of break down to. And then here's kind of a look at what your catalog would look like. Again, if you've seen item 360, this feels almost the same. I think the UX is just a little bit different, and it's got, kind of, again, that column organization of your GTN or UPC, the product name. If you go to our item 360 201, you'll kind of understand what that content quality is, but essentially it is like the rich media and the descriptions that you've put onto your product, particularly on the e-com space. And really it's just built in for Walmart to say, hey, this is how you can improve it. And you can actually click in and kind of understand what recommendations they are suggesting for your product to improve that quality. And so then there's a whole host of information within that that you can toggle through, and it can be really helpful to kind of see that or download those reports or search through your whole catalog as well. And then this is what the setup hub page looks like. Again, you've got your setup new, you can submit item proposals, and it's got some information on there on which one makes the most sense. You can do, item proposals to multi-box shippers items, so pretty easy to use and understand. Maintenance Hub, you've got a couple different workflows that are set up in these cards, whether it's managing the unit costs for an item, uploading your rich media, your imagery, managing that DSV inventory, product content and site experience, as well as item configuration and supply chain. So lots of different workflows that you can go into, as well as the attribute finder. If you're unfamiliar with what the attribute means, it's basically any piece of information that is unique to that product. So once you build it all together, it would be obvious that that is the one single unit product. And so you can use that attribute finder to kind of figure out what you're looking for. And then you've got your submissions manager, pretty similar again to the columns. You've got submission ID, submission description, who it was submitted by, the supplier, and then you've got your status. So you can see again, we've got Walmart action required, complete, and then there's one that's discarded, which may be interesting if you weren't in that particular decision as a supplier to understand why it was discarded. Whether that was on your side as a supplier because you need to, make an edit on it and then resubmit it, or if for some reason the Walmart team reviewing this discarded it, then it would go back to you. All right, so we've gone through order management, we've gone through items in inventory. Now we're looking at the claims and returns scorecard. So this is under performance. So we broke out return trends and payment history kind of into their own buckets, but they are under performance. However, this is more conjecture speaking to kind of what we're seeing now. There could be these breaking out kind of under either more performance pulled under this, or these could break out to their own, but we wanted to call them out separately as they kind of track two different sides of performance. So essentially the return trends area is the dashboard that it's going to display a general sense of kind of your returns, and it's broken down into gross merchandise value, so GMV, units, and your return reasons. So GMV is broken down into the return cost and then the GMV return rate, and both are going to be compared within the previous period. I would also suggest if you're if I'm talking about returns and you're not familiar with some of this language, I'll go look at your supplier agreement. You can find that on Retail Link in the profile section. It's usually in the right top right corner with the little icon. You can click that and then scroll down to My Agreements to make sure you understand some of the terms of your agreements. That will give you helpful context when reviewing these return trends. With the return trends, one thing to call out is most returns are set up not for the price that Walmart paid for the item. So let's say the item retail value is $10 and Walmart paid $8. The return cost will be at the retail value. Unless you have some kind of exception in your return agreement, the standard is that will be the retail value as the return cost for that particular item. So there may be other fines or fees attached to that, or you may have an allowance for returns, but wanted to call that out if you are new to the returns world. And then to break down units, that's going to be in return units and return return rate, which are going to be similarly broken down by comparison with that previous period. So it's going to be kind of on that monthly cycle as well. All right, so return reasons are going to be broken down into a couple of these bullets that are below. And there's a ring graph that will kind of show in one of the next slides on the list. These are the most that we have seen, that we've heard about, but there could be more. So if you do see others, it could even just be listed as other. Let us know. We'd love to add that to the presentation, but these are the ones we're seeing most commonly for suppliers who are in this portal. So the first is changed mind, which I'll have to correct myself if I don't remember, but essentially that may be at that is at the customer level. So it's returned from a customer. You've got damaged, makes sense, does not work, makes sense, didn't meet expectations, feels a little bit more convoluted to understand what that means. So that's when you're wanting to click in and kind of understand what is happening with that particular one. Incorrect or missing items, that makes sense. Poor quality, I think that one also requires a little bit more context and clicking into the specific return. And then other as well, that is, kind of the catch-all and would require you to click in and understand that also. All right. Here's a little bit what the claims and returns scorecard looks like. So you have, you can toggle between owned and DSV. You can toggle between returns and claims. But you can see here, this is going to feel really similar to me, at least, looking at the SQEP dashboard. So SQEP dashboard, OTIF dashboard have kind of been built out like this. You've kind of got those units of measurement here, and then it's letting you know in this card format, the return dollars, and how that's, increasing or decreasing, and the return rate compared to the previous period. Same with return units, and they've got that return rate. So you can see it by both units and that cost as well. So it's helpful to kind of give that quick dashboard view when it comes to returns. All right, so before I go on to our next slide talking about some of the deduction claim information, I think if I were to give an action for this particular one, so the other two tabs that we talked about in Supplier One, you have item management. That one feels really cut and dry. If you have someone on your team who is specifically managing items, it would be important to kind of understand with them what changes are affecting their workflow, what if there is something that's not carried over or is an additional step, what they need. But really that process should be duplicated and shouldn't change too much, except for, doing it in Supplier One versus Retail Link. Same with your order management. That's going to be more of kind of viewing and translating that with Nova as well, making sure that you're understanding what features you're using in each, and hopefully those will either merge together or we'll get a little bit more separation on how to use those. For claims and returns scorecard, this, like I said, feels similar to SQEP dashboard or OTIF dashboard because there's not really any action you can take, particularly on the dashboard, except for really just understanding what's going on. So my suggestion for both the claims and returns scorecard is going to be, understanding what's happening at your business and then doing some kind of root cause analysis. This is the jumping off point. This is not where you would take that action. And we can talk about where you might want to take that action if that question comes up towards the end of the Q&A. So as we're moving on to payments and charges, this section is tracking DSV payments to supplier by supplier ID, distribution center, and report date, as well as some deductions data. And it can only be pulled including one of those pieces of information. So that's a jumping off point that's helpful, but it's not necessarily going to always give you the full story. So it's going to feel similar to like your OTIF or your SQEP scorecard where it's not actionable. But this report does include some helpful information. And some of that we wanted to call out specifically was PO number. So that can be helpful when starting a dispute claim. Distribution center ID, DC name, the date marked as shipped, and the amount paid to vendor. So this data can be tricky to organize. If you've jumped onto, we have a whole slew of webinars for AP deductions. You would have seen, a similar breakdown in our crash course or in APDP 101, but essentially there are several retail link apps for disputing. And this is not even considering some of the applications you would need as the supplier to pull like freight data or some of those proof documentations. But this, to me, the payments and charges has similar information to APIS, the accounts payable inquiry system. So it's not looking like it's completely the same, but this could be pulling up this payments and charges claims scorecard here could be helpful to pull up with APIS, build some of that information, fill in the dots, as well as maybe the accounting scorecard as well. This kind of has some elements of the accounting scorecard. And then lining all of that information, getting your proof documentation and translating that into APDP, making sure all of that is matching up and seeing if there is an area where the proof documentation or the different scorecards aren't matching up and using that to dispute. So again, this is just more of a dashboard to gather kind of information and look at the data in different viewpoints, but not necessarily where you would go and dispute. I'm kind of speaking to my point. This data can be tricky to organize, but it is helpful for that creation when that gathering information for dispute creation and some of that regular sales tracking as well. So here's what the payment history tab looks like. You select your supplier ID, you select the distribution center, and select the report date, and you can download that report and kind of view that. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat or Peter. So with Luminate coming out, there are a lot more of those pre-built reports. This could be a place where you may find helpful information for disputing that's not currently in Luminate. So if you're having trouble pulling something kind of in this area on Luminate, come to the Supplier One payments and charges payment history area, and then see if that kind of helps mitigate some of that data or even helping you think of a different way to pull that Luminate report. Because I believe this information isn't always available in Luminate at this point. So this is kind of what it would look like. Makes sense. You're kind of basically building those columns here with the supplier ID, distribution center, report date. You've got your purchase order, the distribution ID, that distribution center, the date, and then the amount paid to vendor. So you can kind of see that and use that as proof documentation as well. If you haven't disputed a ton with Walmart, I would say when it comes to disputing with Walmart, they're going to value using Walmart data because that's what they have access to. So if you see something in Walmart data that can help you dispute a claim and say that it's invalid, this is a great area to kind of look at. And then on the deduction side, under that payments and charges area. You can also view that from PO number, invoice number, check number. So this to me feels very similar to APIS, that accounts payable inquiry system. However, the accounts payable inquiry system, APIS, still does exist. So there's not been any mention that that's going to be going away either. All right, let's get into the tips and strategies to navigate Supplier One. All right, so here's the Supplier One dashboard. Can give you, and this is specific to your items. This is going to be helpful to understand some of your content. I will call out, I know I'm giving you guys a lot of extra content to go look at, but if you're interested, we did do 3 webinars with One World Sync, and they were great. So if you're not familiar with One World Sync, they are a platform that helps kind of syndicate data, and they actually help with this in particular and kind of talk about how items, especially when it comes to online content, can go from poor to average to great, or in this case, it's good. But we really talked about that good, better, best on that particular webinar. And this is super helpful for not only Walmart's initiative of wanting to streamline and make sure that suppliers are valuing that content quality online. It's really helpful for customers at the end of the day. I know for myself, before I go shop for something, I'm looking it up online. I'm seeing what price I want to go buy it at, reviews, looking at different rich media, whether I'm shopping on Walmart.com or Amazon. I want to understand that product before I get there and make sure that I'm making the best purchase. So really, this is essentially the objective that you're achieving by making sure you're optimizing those scores on your particular items. And then other things on the Supplier One dashboard is to keep an eye out for the update that should have come out by now, but it is the consolidated scorecard. We're going to be building out more information on that as well, but that's really, you can see here some of those key metrics. What it looks like is happening is really consolidating some of those dashboards that I talked about. So you can see like in full and on time, the OTIF dashboard, PO accuracy, that's going to be pulled from the SQEP dashboard. Returns, we just looked at kind of that scorecard. Content quality, returns. It looks like with Supplier One, where I'm starting to get the name, you know what I mean? It's one place for suppliers to kind of understand what metrics are affecting their business and then being able to go take action on that. So that's kind of where we've heard that language of streamlining priorities, seeing what makes sense to tackle, and building objectives and initiatives out for your team from these key metrics. All right, so the supplier action triage. So ideally, Supplier One wants to help suppliers know what their priorities are. And especially if you look back at this particular page, you can see that current score section and the target score. So this one's in red. So I assume that whatever the score is, it's quite under the target score. That's a signal that Walmart is trying to give suppliers to say this should be a priority. And then you can also talk with your other teams and make that priority yourself, but kind of built into the actual scorecard. But in the end, it's going to have to be monitored across teams. And I think this is an exciting conversation, something we talk a lot about at Supplier Wiki, with how supplier teams can continue to build on these initiatives, even though they may be affecting several different teams, or, kind of one team is an island in owning a particular metric, but can really help those conversations talk and build a unified process of all the things that go on as suppliers to get, products from, an idea all the way to through the supply chain and onto a shelf. This is helping suppliers understand that within their teams, but also helping suppliers understand Walmart's priorities, which may not always be aligned, not because they're necessarily opposed, but just from those different viewpoints. So this is, I think, exciting, and something that suppliers should, if you've used it, let us know. We'd like to hear how your team is using it as well. And then I've mentioned this throughout the conversation. This is still, this platform is still at an early stage, and it does look like there may be some additional replacements past item 360 as they're consolidating those particular app functionalities into one platform. But again, we're going to be looking out for this. We're going to be keeping up with those updates. We're going to give you more insight and action on what may affect you as a supplier, some of that tactical information. So if you want to stay up to date, you can subscribe to our newsletter, or just come join us on a webinar, or we'll have our emails and we'd love to send you information if you're, not familiar with something that's going on. So, all right, a couple more things with the future of Supplier One that I want to clarify is it does seem unlikely that Walmart is going to get rid of a lot of those new platforms, especially like I've mentioned, APDP and Nova. But we'll see kind of how that plays out. And if you guys hear whispers, let us know. We want to share those with the supplier community and make sure everyone's prepared for changes at that level. And there is some language around at this time. So again, this is just inferring, but there could be future integrations and we're going to keep an eye out for those. And then if you're not familiar, item 360 is going away and will be replaced by Supplier One at the end of May 2024. So that's fast approaching since May is done in 2 weeks here. So if someone on your team is, primarily, or you have a particular team that manages item 360, however your organization functions, make sure that if you have things being processed, you have a plan in action, and working with your Walmart merchant team to make sure that there's nothing that kind of moves through the cracks when it comes to that particular transition. All right, and this is direct from the source. This is what's available now. Again, you can find this on Supplier Academy, and some of the other sources, but we're also going to send you this deck. So if you can take a screenshot now, but you'll also have this here in a couple days as well. All right, so I think I am in the Q&A section. Peter, let me know if I got any questions.
We had one question about item 360 that we answered as we were going through of just will the functionality be similar? And the answer is yes. So we covered that already, but we have another question about will everything in item 360 move over to Supplier One, and then i.e. activities? So my understanding is that it's basically mirrored, or sorry, Allie, I don't know if you want to
Well, go for it, Peter.
So that everything is, while Supplier One and item 360 were both out, if you updated an item in one, it would update in the other. So everything was totally the same. That was my understanding. But let me know if that's different, or Allie, if you've heard anything differently on that.
I have not heard anything differently. That's how I would have answered that question as well. I would just say, while this transition is happening, kind of give yourself a time period of making sure you're watching both of those and tracking that. Because I know I've been in situations, not with item 360, but where you do something in one system and it's supposed to populate and it just doesn't, or something's incorrect. So just to, have that safety cushion, make sure you're kind of tracking that on your own, whether that's like taking a screenshot in item 360 and saying, okay, this uploaded, and then going over to the Supplier One side and making sure that's the same too. So.
Yep. And then we had one other question in the chat, which could be a pretty interesting conversation starter. But Ernest was saying, where do you find the payments and charges section? I believe it may be missing from my menu. So I don't know if you want to say anything to that, Allie.
Yeah, Peter, and throw your 2 cents in as well. What I'm assuming is that, Ernest, you're a supplier that wasn't a part of that early access program. So that's something that will be rolling out. I would go ahead and ask some questions. I think you can contact either your site admin, and if that's not the case, then we can dig into that a little bit more. But I'd start with your site admin and ask when that's going to be released. So, Peter, what would you say?
Yeah, that was all that I was going to say, was to ask the retail link admin just a kind of a question about that. But yeah, I have no idea. I'm not sure what all the differences are for people who had early access versus people who don't. What is it like now for everyone? Are there some suppliers who it's perceived that they don't need access to some things for whatever reason? You know, all of that is really interesting stuff. We know that Walmart sometimes will release stuff universally and sometimes won't. And Supplier One has been a very kind of tiered process from the very beginning. Like the early access program, I want to say it was, they were talking about it like October of last year, I think. And then so a few people were kind of given early access, and then kind of things were slowly rolled out since then. But Supplier One is interesting. We're not totally sure how big it's going to be in the future. Is this a long-term replacement for Retail Link or not? So now that Item 360 is going away, yeah, it's a little worrying, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the Retail Link admin will actually be able to help with for all of that. But
Yeah, I'm thinking they may be able to give a little bit more context on when, rather than actually implementing it. I think too, commenting in the Walmart supplier support group and asking about that, kind of seeing what other suppliers are saying would be my suggestion as well. But just to reiterate what you said, Peter, it seems to be very tiered. And I don't know necessarily how they're building out those early access programs or who's getting access to what. But maybe worth an ask, because this will either come out very similar or have additional features. Again, we're watching that and making sure that there's not anything being added that we haven't covered already today.
yeah, great. All right, well, that's it for questions today. But if you have any lingering questions, we'll have our email up on the next slide too, so you can use that. We've been talking a lot about our other resources, and here's just a few of the kind of the bigger, lengthier, more like book length resources that we have. Mostly about Walmart here, but we've also got Amazon and Target up there too. So definitely go check it out, supplierwiki.supplypike.com, just to see what all could be helpful for you and your team. And here are our emails. So if you have any kind of lingering questions, or if you want to ask a follow-up question or something like that, you can email us now. You can wait until you get the slide deck in a few weeks too, and then email us that way as well. If you don't want to kind of take a screenshot real quick or something like that too. But we're on these all the time. We do about 5 webinars a month now. So stay tuned for those. And if you have any kind of preferences, if there's anything, if you want a more like advanced version of one of the classes or one of the webinars that we have already, any kind of feedback like that is really helpful for us too. And we love to get that feedback over email. But yeah, that's that.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for everybody who joined today. At Supplier Wiki, we focus on education, but SupplyPike has products that do help with some of that deduction information, actually automating your disputes. So if that sounds like something that's interesting to you, go ahead and find us at supplypike.com, and you can actually get a free analysis of your revenue loss at Walmart and kind of get a peek into what you're doing well, some of your problem areas, and it's completely free. So highly suggest that. And if I don't see you tonight at our happy hour, I hope to see you in another webinar. So thank you guys again.